First off, this has been the mantra of all of my panels throughout the entire MAGFest, and it is bad audio distracts, good audio is invisible, okay? Audio is super important, and they are actually some of the people who taught me that, because for a long time I thought no one cared about audio anymore. It made me very sad, right? Because I have a camera right there that is 4K ProRes RAW, and it's super fancy and all of that stuff, right? And meanwhile, we're like sending out 64 kbps audio on our Spotify, right? Because you're not paying for Spotify, so you're gonna get like the really bad audio, and no one cares. So, but they taught me that that's actually opposite, especially for what they do. And so this is sort of the mantra this time. That's why I wanted to lead with that. So here's the background. Why did you want to upgrade? Go ahead, talk.
Yeah, to your point about sort of when it comes to D&D actual plays, what we do, for anyone that knows Dungeons & Dragons, sessions can take a long time. And so our episodes range anywhere from 2.5 to 4 to 8+ hours. And when
Have we mentioned that we play Dungeons & Dragons on the internet? Have we done that?
We just did.
Oh, did we? Well,
No, context clues, but we play Dungeons & Dragons on the internet.
Oh yeah, you
continue.
may definitely say what you are.
Crooked Moon, Kickstarter, pre-order
My coffee
now.
link is no. Continue.
No, so, and if you look at all of the sort of biggest D&D groups, there is one that has like a visual component, that's Critical Role, and most of the other huge ones are all podcast only. So, immediately that tells you that the primary way folks are ingesting this content is by listening. And even for us, that does have video, we stream on Twitch, a bunch of folks have told us that they turn us on. They're not sitting there watching, little boxes of us sort of emoting and just talking. They're, doing the dishes or doing homework or watching TV or whatever else it is, and they have us on in the background. And so that was for us when we sort of started to grow our audience at the end of 2022. We knew that between video and audio, this is why we had to make the investment in audio first. Anything else to add, fellas?
Yeah, I would say that, 90% of content creation, not 90%. I think a lot of content creation is consumed not visually. They will watch, there are people who maybe know a ton of our stuff, but they don't really remember what we look like. And I think that's something to remember where, and it's also something where people can forgive, maybe you're going to get to this, I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun,
No, go ahead.
But people can forgive at video, they cannot forgive at audio.
Right.
Yep.
It's something where, like, if you have like misophonia, or if you have sensitive ears, it's maybe there are people who just see it and they have sensitive eyes and like, you guys look like shit. I don't want to. Well, I can't watch this. It's a lot more likely that someone will turn away because the audio is not where it should be.
No, I'm with you. I would say the comments that we get the most are from our early stuff is like, wow, I can't listen to this. It's like it hurts my ears. I have it's auditory overload. Blah blah blah. Those are the comments I think that we get the most, and we're like, please, the audio gets better. Don't go anywhere.
Or I can't hear it. It's too quiet. Or the music's too loud. Or Andy and Kelsey are coming through Skype across the internet, and it's a disaster.
YouTube comments of like, hey, commenters, does it ever get better?
Yeah.
Ouch.
It does. We promise.
No.
It does.
You're not
Never gets
convincing me
better.
to put any of this on the internet. Like, I have been scared for years to do anything because I'm going to get comments like, hey, man, you're fat. And I'll be like, yeah, I am. Thank you.
Those are my favorite.
So they also said to me that one of the reasons they wanted to upgrade was because their setup was put together with zip ties and duct tape, and they were being literal. This is the slide. I did not mean this to be as snarky as it looks.
No,
now that I
love it.
look at it, I'm like, whoa, that was really bad. But as you can see, actually, I appreciate this. As an audio engineer, one of the key components is to be field expedient. You need to be able to make something work as best that you can at a moment's notice, right? And that's what they've done. They've zip-tied weights onto their camera, their microphone stands that are holding the cameras up.
Yep.
And they're keeping them from falling down, which is very important. But it is duct tape, and it is what you've got there.
So,
Yeah.
and anyone who's watched us live, you are getting a behind-the-scenes look right now of where the Dungeon Master sits, and that is what it used to look like I mean, it's crazy, but we always said like, oh, you know, when you're helping us out, you're helping us literally improve our held together studio with like, you know, bubblegum and dental floss.
Yeah, I mean, to get it set up, I literally had to fucking MacGyver this, as you can see.
Yep.
Because like what we needed didn't really exist, and sort of the kind of overall crux, and we'll touch back on that sort of over and over, is that what we do and how we play D&D is super specific, and in a lot of ways we never wanted to compromise, where we always want to be sitting around a table with each other. And we don't want to be like, you know, the folks that get a big long table like this and the DM's in the middle and we're all just sort of like sitting here and we're like, what, Andy? What was that? Oh! And we don't want the microphone just sitting in the back of the shot, where like if the microphone's here and like you can see the red record button that some streams do. So kind of finding the triangulation of like, how do we have, you know, sit around a table, mic everybody, get cameras on everybody, and have it feel relatively seamless, like we look like we're just sitting at the table in a home game.
Yeah, and actually their setup and the way they want to do this is what made this super complicated. Because at first, when they first contacted me, I'm like, well, we'll just get some mics, we'll just put them right in front of your face, it'll be fine. He's like, no. And I'm like, oh, okay. So as you can see here, they're set up, you know, they've got a mic on the DM, so they're getting a direct feed. And then you've got a stereo pair, which I'm not super sure that it was meant to be a stereo pair, but it is exactly a stereo pair that is pointed down the table. So it's going to pick up the people who are really close and not so much the people at the end. And then, of course, there's one which you'll see here where you have the mics on the table and you've got this one way over here. Now, they did do great in the fact that they picked the right microphones, in the sense that they were all super cardioids. That was very good.
Did a lot of research.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, you might ask, why not just use more microphones? Well, they couldn't, because they were using a Behringer interface that only had 4 microphone inputs. So they were basically SOL. Like, that is as much as they could do, right? But they also, one of their key things was they did not want to have microphones on the table, because this happens.
Or you're rolling dice,
Yeah,
right? And like,
I cannot imagine.
brought some
I can't, like, can you imagine watching,
been
like,
fun.
one of those Warhammer, like, playthrough things that they do,
battle
and it's
reports.
like,
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of those.
it's just, like, constantly doing that? It would be awful. And I'm sure there's some out there that do that. I don't know. But,
Oh, yeah.
did someone just knock?
Fettuccine Alfredo. We're going to start eating right
Anyway,
now.
all right, that was interesting. So we have, so this is sort of what we were dealing with, but you can see how they want to sit across from one another. They want to be actually playing D&D while they record themselves. And so this is, I mean, their setup is great. Like, the idea of it, it's hard to make that work, right? With the different, the technology that they had.
yeah, at the time we only had like $24.
Yeah, that's a
about
thing.
it.
Right?
Not even our chairs matched.
Well,
we had to borrow some.
well,
from
here's the
Andrew's.
next slide. Andy, let's talk about the tipping point. Like,
Well,
I even put a big old-
yeah, the tipping point was when we realized that $24 doesn't buy anything.
well, yeah, but how did you get more than $24?
Well, all of you, thank you so much. I mean, like, I spent years and years and years, and I still do it, saying like every single penny that our supporters and our fans, you know, the people who supported us day in and day out gave us, went right back into the stream to make it the highest quality production possible. You have all heard me say those words thousands of times over the last 7 years. And it's true. And as we slowly would get one subscriber, and then 6 months would go by and we'd pick up another subscriber and be like, okay,
Wow,
okay,
that's some
big
250.
bucks.
That's now we're
100%
up to,
increase.
now we're up to 2750. Here we go. We're moving, you know. And we just save up our pennies, and every time we'd hit a kind of a break point of like, okay, well, what can we upgrade next, you know? And Rich was really the one who was diving in and doing a lot of this research and kind of had a list of priorities of like, what do we need to do? What's going to make the highest impact for the lowest amount of dollars, you know, to kind of find that intersection that we were talking about earlier.
Mike, do you want to maybe just for context talk about sort of what happened in the back half of 2022, just to the channel in general, and I can talk more about the audience.
Oh. Yeah. We
implications.
streamed for 5 years and no one showed up. This isn't about perseverance in your hobby. We had a very tiny but very passionate community for 5 full years. and we were running at an extreme deficit and loss. And then and we started doing short form content in 2022, and it kind of became a rocket sled as far as building an audience, and we grew like exponentially every month to month. And I think, but from Gen Con to Gen Con, our YouTube channel grew by like 2,500 times, in 1 year. And so suddenly we actually had capital rolling in. We had a Patreon, YouTube ad revenue, TikTok ad revenue, that sort of stuff that we were able to finally actually afford a legitimate setup, basically.
And the point of this slide, right, is just to say that this was not our first setup. This wasn't even, this wasn't even our second setup. This was our third setup. And
have the original?
I should have pulled up the original setup, and maybe we'll get there. But if I'm jumping the gun, our original setup was we had a single blue snowball, which is a area of effect, AOE, all the surround sound, whatever it's called, microphone, in the middle of the table, and there were 4 of us in person speaking into it. And then I had to turn up the TV because Annie and Kelsey were on Skype, and their audio was coming out of the TV into the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even have a direct feed because there was lag, and I couldn't figure it out.
It's hard to play D&D when half your friend group is in Maryland and 2 people live in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
And so, again, more MacGyvering. But the idea, right, is that once we saved up some pennies, then we sort of got the setup you see here. And that, at the time, it was a big investment, right? And then it wasn't until we had sort of built the business to have a legitimate revenue stream and we could actually budget for this and say, okay, well, Sweetwater has this nice, like, if you pay for half, you can, like, finance the rest of it, 0%, right? So we were very responsible about it, and we sort of budgeted and accounted for all of it in our overall budget once we were ready. And so sort of the first piece of advice is you can start small, and eventually you'll work your way up where, hopefully you can do sort of this full-blown overhaul like we did.
And one of the something to note about this, the setup that they have here, even though this slide looks snarky, and it isn't, right? This is probably relatively expensive. Right, each one of those microphones is probably $300, right? There's 4 of them, right? Yeah. And if I did my math right, that's like $1,200, right? Yeah. And then the Behringer's got to be at least $200.
At least, yeah.
At least, maybe 3 or 4. So you're already in for $1,800, right? That or more, right? So even this setup is also expensive. Right? And so that was one of the things, like in my last panel, I wanted to make sure people understood that once you figure out what you want to do, you can allocate your funds, right? As opposed to allocating funds before. Because, for this was, this is what they had to do. But it could have been, like, they could have used an omnidirectional microphone, or they could have done something like that. However, then you would get more of the room, which is one of the other things that is always a hard part with these kind of streaming setups is trying to get rid of as much of the room as possible, right?
Oh yeah, and I've seen Facebook posts on like D&D groups, and it's like I invested $250,000 and turned my basement into like a streaming studio that looks like a tavern, and it's all like stone and tile, and our first stream is tomorrow, and I'm like, wait, what? You're $250,000 deep and you haven't streamed once? What if you don't like it? Like, what if all the audio is gonna bounce off of all the tiles?
What if it ruins your friendships?
Well, someone asked me in my first panel. They were like, well, you say that we need to do acoustic treatment, but I've got a set. And I was like, well, you better figure out how to incorporate it into your set. Like, how about you not make it a tavern and put up a green screen and do a replacement tavern and put the green screen over your acoustic treatment. Yeah. You would be surprised. Well, maybe you won't because people are savvy. But you see some of these YouTube setups and they zoom out and it's like, it looks completely different than what you thought it was, right? Like I have a friend who wanted to do a recording YouTube channel, and they were like, look, I've got a bunch of he has a bunch of racks of equipment behind him. They're all on. None of them are hooked up, oh, wow. Right? Yeah. He just went and found bargain basement just stuff. but he runs like signal through it so it looks like they're on, and so it makes it look like oh my god, this guy is in a multi-million-dollar studio, and if you were to zoom out, it's like a bedroom.
Yeah.
Right? It's like his bed is where
That's
he
funny.
set his laptop to do the video part, you know, and it's just, so it's important to think about those things when you're building these setups. All right, while we're talking a little bit about it, you get to see us putting together the studio.
Oh, this is fun.
Hey, man.
Very high.
Oh, I've never gotten to
I
see
like my
this.
cargo shorts.
This is amazing.
We write off all of our cargo shorts.
It was much slower than this in real life.
Yeah, this is increased by 10,000 times, just to kind of get a perspective of how long this all took.
10,000.
Right, and so you can see part of their room. They've got the foam acoustic tiles on it, and you'll see that their ceiling kind of goes up at an angle, which is actually really beneficial because the reflections don't necessarily reflect right back into the microphones.
Yep.
But their ceiling is like 22 feet tall. I mean, it's more. It's not that high.
It's at least
really
it's like 18 to 20.
It's like
As
18
someone who's climbed a ladder up to the highest point of that ceiling, I can tell you it's extremely high.
Okay, and so when they and they have an air conditioner that is like literally right next to where they film, and like one of the microphones is like right next to it, and they don't like, you don't own this house, right?
No.
Right.
It's a
so,
rental.
So it's not like you could just go in there and be like, hey, I'm going to alter this permanently so it's a good for streaming. So we have to work around those things, like try to put up acoustic blankets or like, because to fix an air conditioner, the only way to do it is to turn it off, or is to put in a muffler. Basically, it's like a big wooden muffler. It's like a maze, and you put that in next to the air handler. So like you got to go into your attic and you got to hook this thing up, and then it's got to end up.
Yeah,
and
no
what
thanks.
happens is it like the sound bounces in this thing, and it ends up being doesn't blow as much air as it did before, so you're still really hot. And then two,
Doesn't work.
it makes it quieter. But like that's an ask to do that. And of course you could hire someone to do it, and then that's going to be like, you know, that's why recording studios cost $1 million.
Yep.
Because now it's easier because we all have LED lights. But back in the day, there were only one kind of light bulb that you could get in a recording studio, and it had no sound. So like it wouldn't buzz.
Oh,
It was
wow.
one very specific one. So as you can see here, we've decided to raise the microphones up on this, which basically we decided to make a rigging that you would do like in a DJ set. Except they were gracious enough to go to Home Depot and get the steel pipes, and then we put in C-stands, and there it is. See, he's so happy. He's like, yeah.
So Derek calls this the Starship Enterprise, and Mike and I, the day or two before John got to the studio to start this setup, we went to how many hardware stores?
It was a lot.
And then we didn't, basically, you can, like, how do you ask for one of these things, right? Like, do you have any steel tubes?
Give
And
me
they're
your
like,
pipes.
oh yeah, we have.
I need some pipe.
we have pipes, and they sent us to the plumbing section, and they're all like, it's all pre-rusted because they know you're gonna like bury it under the ground. It's oily and greasy, and I'm like, we started to like lift it up. They were super heavy, and Mike and I realized there's no way this can be right. Like, there's no way this is gonna work, and so we drove to like Lowe's, and they showed us the same thing, and then finally. You had to go work on something else, so then I went back out, and I happened to ask like a second or third employee at Home Depot, and they're like, "Oh no, what you want is electric." I forget
Conduit, yeah.
conduits.
Yeah.
Yes, and so these are aluminum, or I don't even know if they're aluminum,
they're
or
aluminum,
like
yeah.
they're aluminum conduits, and the idea is that they hold like wiring. And finally the skies parted and the sun shone through, and I by myself I got like however many of these things and crammed them in the car, and they're sitting on top of I think steel C-stands.
Yeah,
right?
they are steel Sentry stands, so C-stands, and they have, I used C-clamps, like super clamps, and there are like double super clamps to make 90-degree stuff, and so that's how we get the 90-degree pulls and across. You could buy like specially created things that make rigs, but they are super expensive, and that wasn't what we needed to do. One other thing about the conduit was, Rich texted me, he's like, well, is aluminum okay? And I'm like, sure. And then I'm like thinking to myself, maybe. And so like,
Oh no.
I got to tell you this. So I had created a spreadsheet to find out the tensile strength of different things because I was worried that we were going to stick cameras on this and lighting and it was going to be heavy and it was just going to go all the way down. And so I'm looking up weights and I'm adding it all up and I'm like, okay, yeah, if it's balanced like this and it'll be fine. Totally fine, right? But it's like I have this huge Excel spreadsheet that has all the tensile strength and when things will buckle and all of this stuff, and I had to figure out how to calculate it. I'm like, I'm an audio engineer. Why am I calculating construction stuff? Like, this is weird.
Yeah, it's like 8:30 p.m. and I'm texting John, and it's also like, what diameter should it be? And John's like, like, what do they got? And I'm like, well, how does like 1 1/4 work? Yeah, it should be fine.
That should be fine. Let's just do that. And then I was like typing them in my spreadsheet. Yeah, it's fine. My wife's a biomedical engineer and a neurologist. She's super smart. And like she was like, oh yeah, I'll do this Excel spreadsheet. Excel to her, like she should go and do one of the, shout out to my wife. She should go do like the Excel. Have you ever seen the Excel like games? Well, it's not just the speed run, but like they have like 4 people and they're all like doing Excel super fast, and whoever gets the answers first wins. And it's like she's just super good. So she's sitting there figuring all this stuff out. But yeah, so the Sentry stands worked out great. And what this was for was to get everything off the table, above them, okay? And then also allow for people who want to play apparently with a standing desk. So there's a
Because
DM who
somebody
likes to,
just has to be so special.
so that was one of the requirements because I was
That's in
like,
my contract. I need to be able to stand.
So what they can do is they can go to each of the Sentry stands and they can either lift the whole rig up or they can move the microphone booms down because every C clamp has a microphone boom attached to it that rotates this way, and you can rotate the shock mounts too. So it's super easy to move around. So let me talk a little bit about the what's and whys, like why we did it. So we chose to get condenser microphones because they didn't want them in front of them, right? You boom out an SM7B and you won't hear anything. It's just not going to work, right? Sorry. So as soon as you get to that point, you're going to need a condenser microphone so you can get enough sensitivity to actually use it. Now, we chose to use a supercardioid microphone because it is the most directional. This is a supercardioid microphone also. It's an SM58. And so it works here, but it doesn't work back here so well. So that way, or on the sides. And so I really should have brought like a noise thing and you'd be able to hear it. But we chose this in particular because we wanted to eliminate as much room and as much of everybody else. 7 people is a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And they are around what, like a 6-foot table?
Yeah, and half of us are Italian.
It really does complicate things.
Yeah. Yes, it's a 6x4 table.
It's a 6x4 table.
Regulation Warhammer
It's
table.
a regulation Warhammer table. And so they're really close together, and so we wanted to eliminate as much bleed as possible. If we reference the Critical Role, because that was one of the things, hey, we want to sound like Critical Role, they have like a flying V setup, or it's straight. I think it's a flying V though, right?
Yeah, it's like a triangle V situation.
Right.
Yeah.
So everybody can see each other, right? And the DM, like, I don't know, it's like this, and the DM is here, and everybody is this way. Well, all the cameras can get the right angles, so no one sees the microphones and no one sees the other people, and you can get the microphones so they're boomed out enough so you get enough separation. But that, their room is not big enough to do that. But the setup that we made will accommodate it when they can, because it's just 3 stands. So all they have to do is go out this way and maybe get one longer pipe, and then for the DM, and you'll be fine. So it does work, but that's why I wanted to do that. Now, there is one funny thing, and I'm going to say this, and this is just me saying this, is they said, we want to sound like Critical Role, and I said, are you sure? And the reason is because I listened to it, and I was like, I don't think they sound so good, right? And it's because they use shotgun microphones. And we did this. So I came to their studio, and I brought 3 microphones. I brought a shotgun microphone. I brought, 4. Cardioid, and then two super cardioids. Well, 1, I think. And we decided which one we wanted.
And then did you bring a cardioid 64? I'm sorry, I had to. I've been waiting. Yeah. I've been sitting on that joke for the past 10 minutes. Okay.
Absolutely, cardioid 64.
I'm done.
Anyway, so I brought in some microphones and we tested them out. We had Mikey do his shtick into them and find out what sounded the best.
Do you want to give an example of like what you would do when John and I
I
were,
would
like,
just
working on-
scream. I don't remember.
So this is the first iteration of glove shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just be like, oh, I'm speaking now. Oh, I'm yelling. Oh, I'm yelling. Now I'm going to talk really soft. Here, I'm someone who isn't Italian at the table. I don't use my diaphragm. Why would I ever use my diaphragm to speak? That's ridiculous. And then I scream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is exactly what he did.
Yeah,
That's
we use
basically-
the scientific method.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
That is official audio engineer
We picked the best
stuff.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. Is the most important thing is to test the microphones out. You can't just go, hey, someone else did it, so I'm going to use that one, because the microphones Critical Role uses are like $1,100 microphones. Now, the reason why we don't want to necessarily use shotguns is because indoor is not where shotguns go. Shotguns are for outdoors. The reason is because they're really good at getting rid of wind. But the problem is they get rid of the acoustics on the outside, which is great, except when you're in a room, and in a small room, the acoustics you're getting rid of is your own voice. So as you speak into it, it's like canceling out your own voice, and it makes it sound a little weird. So most people indoors will use a super cardioid microphone, much like what they already had. Okay, now the reason we couldn't use what they already had was because there's 7 of them. If we bought 4 more of these microphones, we would have ended up with a lot of noise, okay? So we ended up buying MKH50s, Sennheiser MKH50s, and it's because they have 12 decibels of self-noise. I know this is getting complicated, but you need to know it.
It'll be on the quiz.
It'll
Yeah,
be on the
seriously.
quiz. You have to know this. Because
Seriously,
microphones have noise, right? Just normal noise. Dynamics have them. Everything has them. And the bigger that number is, the cheaper the microphone is, the bigger that number will get. And that's totally okay if it's just one person. 2 people, okay. But when you have 7, every time you add the microphone, just without anybody talking, right? In pure silence, every time you would add a microphone, you add 3 decibels to the noise. Not a microphone, but a pair of microphones. So you're looking at, what is that? We just rounded to 8, so it's like 24 decibels of noise just right off the bat if they were using the microphones they had. You would hear that. Yep. It would just be like this in the background. Wow. Not to mention the audio interface they might be using would also have its own noise, and again, you're using 8. Just as an example, people who would do multi-track recording, right, and have like a big board. The most modern multi-track consoles had automated mute buttons. And the reason was because the console was so noisy that when you weren't using the tracks, you had to mute them. And before they had automated ones, it was the intern monkeys that had to sit there with their fingers onto it, and they were like, okay, mute, and unmute, and mute, and unmute, and they had to sit there. I know, because I was one of them. We had to sit there and mute tracks. And it's because of the noise. And that's something that we still get plagued with even now in the digital era, because we need to have the right equipment. And speaking of noise, we picked up this piece of gear, not because it wasn't noisy, because they didn't have a budget for something that wasn't noisy. Okay, because we had to spend it on the microphones. Microphones are always the better investment because they come with you. Interfaces, like in 5 years, this interface probably won't even work with the computer, right? Because we'll have like Apple Vision headphones and we plugged into our spinal cords or something. But the thing is I called up my guy at Sweetwater and I said, hey, send me all of your interfaces that are within this spec that have 8 channels, and I listened to all of them. I listened to the noise, and this interface had the nicest noise. And I was like, well, if we're going to have it, it might as well sound okay. This was very pleasant, very calming noise. The one that was the least amount of noise was the pre-Sonos, and it went, ee! But its noise was like this high-pitched squeal. And I was like, oh, that's not good. 8 of that is never good. So that's why we went with this. It was expandable, so if they ever wanted to add another contingent of 8 people, we could. Although you do have audio, you have music coming in through your computer through a loop back, and that's also coming into a speaker in the room, which is another layer of complexity. So you have the speaker in the room plus the thing. It's very complex. But this had enough inputs for that. Actually, it would be nice if there were 2 more, I think, but we don't have the other 2, right? You're going through an Apple TV / Chromecast or something.
So that was one solution that we did. What we're using currently is, I think it's going through the 8th. It's going in mono.
Okay. Through
the 8th input, because we have 7 mics plugged in now.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, I mean, yeah, we're sort of at capacity there, right? But it's sort of like, our audio setup is never final, and so we've already talked about like what does phase 4 look like, right? If this is our 3rd setup, what's our 4th setup going to be?
Right. This may be a stupid question. I know that I'm on the panel, so I shouldn't be asking questions.
It's a quiz.
Classic.
But what does the pleasant noise sound like of the thing that we went with? Like, what does it evoke?
It's like white. It's like the ocean.
Ooh,
See, and I even said it like my Baltimore heritage. The ocean. It sounds like the ocean.
Going down
the ocean, hon.
Sounds like the ocean, hun. And it's a nice white noise that's very, it doesn't stand out. It's just there, right? And I'm not at all like, don't go out and buy this. Like, I'm just saying this is what we use because this is what fit the bill.
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored. Now, if we want to if you want to sponsor us, let's do this. Yeah. But no, really. And the other thing about it is they needed to be able to do loopback, which is when you bring someone in from Skype so they can hear you and you can hear them. And it's not like, ESPN where it's like, so how was that? And you wait.
Right.
That's right.
It's pretty good, and it's like because it takes that long for them to get the audio. So the loopback helps, and a lot of audio interfaces have that now, but this one hasn't. And they use a PC, okay, which is actually good because they use OBS.
Nerd.
So like at one point, I was about to say, guys, you really should buy another computer. And then I went home and tested OBS on Mac, and I was like, don't buy a new computer because it doesn't work.
Oh my God.
But they use a PC, so we couldn't necessarily use a lot of the interfaces that some people might because they're very specifically, they work with one, like their software works best on one computer or another. So that's another layer that you have to work with.
Yeah, and for a second there, we're like, okay, do we just get a Mac that's a streaming PC and it has all these plugins and systems that we could use? But I'm glad that, OBS was the clincher there.
Well, they should get a new streaming PC.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's
even
that's
if it's
the
like
next
a
big
Nook or
investment.
something,
It's on the
it's still much better.
Yeah, that's a 2024 budget item. Yeah.
Right. So this is just a diagram of like how I envisioned it when I sent it to them. I'm like, hey, this is what we should do. And so you can see where I have the mount and all the microphones are above them. And again, we're going to get to like what's really good, what still needs to be worked on kind of thing. The other layer that I didn't put a slide in for is we did add some plugins. And you have to be super careful about the plugins because they can add latency, and latency is bad. And so we've worked it out, so we've got compressors and gates, but we weren't able to do any noise suppression because the noise suppression added too much latency, right? And of course you can't use the AI noise suppression that's new because it's different every time because it's AI and it's like, oh, that's different, let's do it a different way. And so you're gonna get like a different sound every time you noise correct with the AI plugins. So we have compressors and gates and some EQ to help things sound good. But that's all, because what we did is instead of having like a mixing board, we use a DAW because they're going to be recording it anyway. They're recording the audio separately so that they can mix it later, right? Or do podcasts or something, right?
Yeah. Well, and to the point about sort of the latency caused by the add-ons and what you're mentioning about like every additional signal increases the noise, like turns into this exponential like feedback thing. The very first stream that we did, and for folks that were around at the time that watched our Crooked Moon announcement stream, where we did an Edge of Midnight one shot, the live audio on that was sort of really off, and we couldn't figure it out, and we were late, and sort of we just played it and recorded the stems and edited it in post. And John and I hopped on the horn and like figured out what's going on. It's because there was like one setting in one plugin that was on all of the lines, and it added a tiny bit of latency, where when there's no latency, all of the mics line up perfectly, and the fact that my voice is coming through my mic and Mike's mic and Andy's mic, it doesn't matter, because like this is the mic in front of my face, it sounds fine. But as soon as all of them are off by a tiny little bit, it was this sort of cacophony that like it just made the problem sort of exponential.
Straight to hell.
Yes, sir.
Yes. This is
hey.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, this is one of our editors. This was the man that edited that episode.
From Bard City.
Yeah,
Bard City.
hi.
From
Winters.
MAGFest.
Everybody wave
Bard
Winters.
City.
Follow them on Instagram.
love
They're
them.
amazing. And to this point, for our, if you can jump back to the last slide real quick, just for folks that like maybe aren't audio people but sort of know our content. So this setup here was specifically to Once Upon a Witchlight, right? And so if you've seen our content, normally the bottom two chairs would be where I sit and Mace sit, and then the other side is Andy, Mike, and Derek, and then obviously Nikki is in the seat on the left side. And so this is just sort of the above view of our table.
Right. And so this just shows you the rig from the top, and this is sort of the rig from the side, and how we would potentially position things. But again, the positions change. Yes, sir.
One super clamp, Breakfast in America, amazing album. No, terrible joke.
Clamp 64.
There's a lot of multi-person podcasts, but for whatever reason, they feel like they have similar audio quality. But for whatever reason, when people start talking over each other, sometimes it's easy as anything to hear. It's like you're in a party and you can hear two conversations clearly at the same time. And other times it just sounds like a bunch of voices are being flushed down the toilet simultaneously. Mm-hmm. What kind of determines that sense of space and how well voices will play with each other? Is that just a byproduct of the people, or is that a technical question?
Without hearing it, this will just be a guess, but it's probably a little of both. So there is an amount of showmanship when you do these podcasts and these things, right? You know, Mikey acts, and everybody acts. Everybody has a character, right? And they all do a thing. And sometimes you have to be aware of what you're doing and where you are with the mic, just like you would if you were a singer, right? So I recommend. I'm a music guy by trade, and so a perfect example of this is go look up an old David Bowie clip of Spiders from Mars, right? And it's him on stage, and he's singing full throat, but he's like 6 feet behind the microphone, and he just walks up to that microphone, and it's the most perfect crescendo you will ever hear. And it's because he had mic technique, and he knew where was that microphone, what was going to happen when I made the moves that I needed to make, right? Or I wanted to make. And so part of it could be that everybody gets on that mic and they start swallowing it, and then you get like the proximity effect, and everything gets really dark and muddy, and everybody's shouting because everybody wants to hear, and that's one of the problems with this, having something in front of you. Or it could be that someone spent a lot of time having every person do their shtick on their microphone and making sure each microphone is EQ'd in a way that makes that person sound as natural as possible, right? And so it could be either way. But I think that's probably, it's kind of like what we try to do. Although I was never in a room, like the whole cast was never in the room with me at one time. Yeah. But you know, we could go in and have every cast member speak into their microphone, you know, place it exactly where they think they're going to be, and then EQ it to the point where each person sounds real. And again, this is for like the Twitch stream, right? Because they could always do this later in post too. That could be another thing. So it's a sort of a roundabout way, but I think it's kind of a little bit of
But
both.
when you're hearing that sound separation, there's a set of secondary cues that your brain is getting. One is, as you mentioned, the proximity effect. So if you're having that second group that's having a side conversation, literally have them move away from the microphone or something like that, and you're no longer picking up the low end, you have more sibilance, and that just gives your ear more cues to separate the two apart.
Yep. So, how does it feel to work in the setup? Let's talk a little bit about. That's cool. Don't worry about that. All right. So this is what it looks like when it was all built. So why don't we talk about you guys talk some more about how is it to work with the setup? Like how is it to perform with it?
Oh, I mean, it's 1,000 times better. Like, it's not even close. We're not even talking about the same universe, in my opinion. For a couple of reasons, us walking around and moving, things are not at eye level that we're like, I'm trying to walk around the studio and get a small weight plate in my face. So it's more well constructed, first off. And then two, being able to move the microphones individually because it's all modular, right, is absolutely fantastic. And it just feels professional. Like, the first time that I walked in there, I was like, holy crap, this is like the real deal. Like, we're not just a bunch of schlubs anymore, And it's being able to adjust all of the mics and everything individually makes it so much easier on us. And that's just from a purely talent use perspective.
Yeah.
I'm sure Rich can give a much more technical, view, but.
And I mean, I think that it's the modularity, is that a word?
Yes.
That makes it really good. And I think that if everyone in the group and that played with us had the same level of showmanship, we could get all of the mics off of the cameras at all times. It wouldn't be an issue. But for people that are quieter than truck mice and don't use their diaphragm when they speak, you can pull the microphone down and put it right in their face, and it's in the shot, but we're still able to actually hear them. In the previous setup, we just have to accept, well, no one can hear them. And there are a couple episodes of our podcast, or Curse of Strahd, our only podcast, I guess, Curse of Strahd, for now, where I had a friend who was listening to it, was like, oh my God, I can't hear two of these characters. Like, are they even talking? Like, what are they saying? And it was just something that we had to accept, that we were just going to lose it forever because there wasn't enough projection. Now we can just take, because the microphones had to share, they're on the table. Now we can literally lower them and put them right in front of their mouth.
Yep.
And you can see it on camera, but for people who only listen to it, they'd have no idea, and it would actually sound fine.
And yeah, if you go back and listen to old episodes where in the original sort of diagram where we had the two sort of the stereo pair on one side of the table, and then on the far side there's just the singular microphone. So if you listen to like Edge of Midnight, where Mike and I are on the same side of the table, we're just sharing the side of one microphone, right? And then the people that
it's
are
a super cardioid,
yes,
so it's even.
And so it doesn't, it's not doing great. And then the people over here, they feel more present. They feel closer. There's a little more bass in their voice. I don't know all the technical terms,
Yeah.
but like they just sound more present. And you can hear that when Mike and I speak, even though we're super loud, we still kind of feel like we're in the other room.
Yeah.
Or that we just sound a little far away. And so that's why, is just sort of the limitations of those four microphones that were on the table. And this totally eliminates all that. And I love this picture because it shows my favorite part of the setup, color-coded cables. They're an absolute joy, and there's lots. Here you can see. Probably the same brand, maybe not
Yes,
sponsored
they are
again.
Yeah.
But I use the color coding in my actual software where I know, that seat is green, and that seat's red, and that seat's purple, and it doesn't matter. Another challenge that we deal with is that our campaigns we're playing musical chairs, right? So there's a 4-person party, a 5-person party, a 3-person party. Everybody's moving around all over the place, so we can't just say, hey, this is the Andy seat and this is the Richie seat. So but at least I know, okay, for today, Andy's at purple, and then for this campaign, he's at red. And it helps, at least for me, my brain, kind of process it easily.
We don't do well with numbers,
No,
Elizabeth
no, we
Avantris,
don't.
so we need
Mike,
colors.
1, 2, 3, just right
Yep,
out.
yep.
Right out.
And another thing that I think, and it wasn't just the physical aspect that was MacGyvered. For the old audio system to work, I needed to find like free virtual or digital audio cables to patch audio from the interface into my DAW, which I use Adobe Audition, and then from Audition into OBS. And these virtual audio cables, they're like open source and they're free. They're not very well maintained, and they might just like break one day, and we'd be like, "Hey guys, we have to cancel the stream because this virtual audio cable broke, and I have no way to fix it."
Oh, did you want to watch D&D? Too bad.
Yeah, no, and so it's this new setup, the mixer that we bought totally resolves all of it. It's all handled with the mixer. Again, to Andy's point, it just feels more professional. And, I'm no producer, but like it lets me, a relative sort of Luddite in this area, still manage to put out what we do in a way that is streamlined enough and reliable enough. And it's the reliability that's been so huge, to the point where I think there was only one stream where I had to, like, something was sort of off, and I just turned it off and turned it back on, and it fixed everything. Yeah.
Yeah, because you sent a Discord message. You're like, alert! Nothing
Oh,
works!
John,
Nothing works!
help! Oh God, we
What's
stream in
going on?"
5 minutes.
And I was like, turn it off and turn it back on. You're like, it works. Okay, good.
Thanks, John.
It's crazy how that works.
Everything is on fire.
Restart. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So there's another look from the DM position. So the future. So let's start with let's be. We don't have a compliment sandwich here. Like as an educator, we're always supposed to have compliment sandwiches. But let's do the. Yeah, it's where you put the compliment, and then the meat is the criticism, and then you have another compliment to make. So it's like you feel good, and then you're like, oh, I don't feel so good, and then, I feel good again, right? It's very important. Anyway, so what needs work? Like, what are our, because we may need, like, one day you're going to be billionaires, and we're going to have stage 4. And what are some of the things that need work?
I think that for me, there's a few things. Maybe I'll throw out a couple, and then you guys can jump in, and I have some more. But the first thing that I think we struggle with, and this isn't necessarily has anything to do with the setup itself, but to the point about half of us being Italian and half of us not, or half of us sort of speaking quietly and half of us not, but also you have there are two modes of chuckles, or at least a handful, where a character could be screaming and emoting 1 second and then speaking very quietly and intimately the next. And having a microphone that's like not on your head or not like in your face that can manage that is a challenge where I can crank the gain, and if I'm talking like this and I'm doing role play, like I'm Pike, right? But then if I really project and I'm yelling, then you can kind of hear it start to peak, right? And there's a finesse there that I haven't gotten savvy enough to figure out. And again, I think that there's sort of a performance or a showmanship level of, we could probably be better about, okay, I'm going to sit right here. And to use Derek as an example, because he's not here to defend himself, right?
Yeah.
You've seen him. He likes to do this, and like he'll hey, Grick, he's talking back here, and then he'll lean forward and like crack a beer, and then he's talking like this, and so it's having, and so I'm literally live mixing him. Where, oh God, he's leaning back, and so if you'll see me, I'm like this, and I'm like clicking with the mouse, I'm turning him up. And then when he gets closer and I see, okay, he's good, I'll turn him down a little bit. I don't really want to have to do that.
Right.
And so that's one thing. Another thing is just, to your point, it's the space and it's the shape of the table. As much as I love a regulation 6x4 Warhammer table, it has this horrible little lip to catch dice that we like have our arms on all the time. That's really uncomfortable. But the real problem with it is I think Critical Role figured it out with this flying V setup where it's almost a triangle table, and eventually I'd love to have a space where we could get a custom table and play in that configuration. But we're sort of at the point where we play D&D in the loft of our rented townhouse, and until that's not the case, we're sort of stuck with what we have. But again, to the earlier point, the modularity of this, where we get a brand new table and a brand new shape, and I think we have so much extra aluminum piping, I think that we won't even need new pipes. It could probably configure to...
Conduit.
Right,
Conduit.
Aluminum conduit.
Aluminum
Inch and a quarter.
Yes.
Aluminum
Inch and a
conduit.
quarter.
Conduit.
And then, so do you guys have any other examples?
Yeah.
Let me pull up my notes here.
Here's what I'll say. On more than one occasion, we'll be doing our live testing before we go live, and Rich will record us. He'll say, "Andy, say something," and I'll say some things, and I'll try to do some different stuff or whatever, and then he'll play it back, and I'll be like, "Man, that sounded great," and then Rich will go like, "That sounded like shit," and I'll be like, "Yeah, I could tell, yeah." Like, here's the thing, right? I think it all sounds amazing, and I am definitely one of those people on the other end that struggles to hear the very subtle changes and the subtle, differences in a lot of this stuff. So when I think it sounds great, and then I look at him and I go, well, what can we do to make it sound better, right? And he'll list some things, and there's all these little minute things that you can twist and turn knobs and adjust and move that's so far beyond me that I'm just grateful for the absolutely massive jump in setup that we have now, that I just appreciate it. And it all fascinates me, but I am definitely, this is definitely not my expertise, and every time we talk about this, I learn stuff that's new to me, so.
Excellent.
For me, what needs work, I know that's not the topic of the panel, but it's more so, I think it's great. And we're at the point now where our audio is really good, and I'm the monkey. I just dance for be a clown for Chuckles. But for me, it's the video, I think now needs to be upgraded because of the algorithm. Our audio now is at the point where the algorithms of the short form contents are like, okay, you pass, we will deliver your stuff, but you don't have a ring light and like a $5,000 camera, and you don't look like Mr. Beast, so we're not going to deliver your shit. That to me is kind of where the big gap is, but that's not related to the panel.
Well, but it it is in a sense, because one of the solutions, right, to some of these things that they're talking about, like in order to fix like the latency issue that we have, let's start with the noise, right? There's a lot of noise in the room, and part of that will get solved one day if they ever move into a studio or something that can be purposely built to do the thing, right? And that's something that they're already incredibly popular, but if they stay popular for long enough, then they'll be able to do something like that, right? Well, I hope so.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Please don't leave us.
But like, this is another thing that comes with what I've talked about all weekend, and that is there aren't any solutions. There's only trade-offs, right? You have to figure out what. So like a radio station, what do? They have compressor. They have preamp, a compressor, EQ, and a gate on every single microphone, and there's a producer in a room on the console, live mixing the show. Like, that's what they do. They have a separate person who does that. They're called the producer, and they're actually at a board, probably now. Maybe not. Maybe they're in a DAW now. But all the radio stations I've ever been in, they're at a board. They have all of this stuff, and because they work with the same people over and over and over and over again, they have settings, and they just go, it's like this sports radio person. It's going to be this setting, and they set it up. But that's the thing, Rich here, he produces while he acts, and that can be difficult. Right?
I don't recommend it.
And that's something that I've always told artists that I work with when it comes to like doing any kind of audio work. Sometimes it's good to have someone else do it, because that way you can just act. You can just do the thing that artists need to do instead of having to do everything. Okay? So we have 5 minutes left. Do you guys have any advice for our... By the way, I will be tearing all of this down, and I'm sure they'll love to answer any questions you have
100%.
about anything. But let's give them some parting advice for the budding podcasters and or D&D and or Twitch streamers and or whatever else they are out there.
I'm going first.
Please.
Because it's obvious, we already mentioned it, and it's the only one that I have, and I won't let you take it.
Okay. Let's see if it's
Start small.
Yep.
Start cheap. Don't overdo it, right? You don't know if you're going to enjoy this. And again, I'm just reiterating what Rich said earlier, but there's no reason for you to sink a ton of capital into something that you've never even tried before. Or maybe you've tried it a little bit and you suddenly think you have to make this big jump. You don't. it can be an ever-evolving process, a living creature that grows alongside you and your hobby that may eventually become your career. So don't be afraid to have humble beginnings and just make incremental upgrades as you go, and you can afford to do them, and it doesn't, put you in a bad spot.
Yeah, on that point, obviously there could be a million different areas where you're looking for advice, but I think that when it comes to audio and video, getting by enough to just hack the algorithm to where they deem you acceptable is basically what you need to. That's the table stakes. Everything after that should be focusing on the quality of the story, the camaraderie, the chemistry, all of the quality of the actual product of the content that you're offering, and then all of the dressing. As long as it's not sending people running away with their ears bleeding or like being basically squelched by the algorithm. That's the good place to start.
Yeah, and I think that, even outside of audio and video, content is still king, right? Like, audio is king when we're comparing it to video, but if the content itself, if you're not having fun, making it, then you're not going to have a whole lot of motivation to sort of keep going. So the most important thing is, for any kind of content creation, make sure you're doing it for fun. Make sure you're not breaking the bank or going into horrible debt just because you think that some ideal will be your next break. Make sure that the content's good. Make sure you love the content. And if you love the content, there will be an audience out there that loves it. And do it for fun. Like us, we at one point had $27 and that was it, right?
Yeah.
And we sort of had to plan, for our next $27 every 6 months, how would we invest it? So if you do it because it's a passion, you do it because you love it, then it's just a sort of a fun, exciting thing where it's like, okay, we're finally at that next tipping point. Okay, then you can dive in and you'll have your own unique setup that has sort of your own unique needs, and then you're gonna look up John on the internet, give him a call, and you have him consult for your own audio setup, and it'll be great. So do it for fun, and everything else will follow.
Yeah, I think that's all really great advice. And why don't we just give a hand for Legend of Avantris, because they were good enough to come. So that's their socials. That's how you get in contact with them if you want to watch their stuff. You'll see the QR code next to that. This is my last panel this year. I'm always looking for topics because I like to come to MAGFest and give you what you want to learn. And I can talk for hours about the dumbest things. So, that QR code will bring you to my contact page, and that just lets you throw out a thing like, hey, I'd love it if you do this, and I'd be happy to. If you have any questions about your own setup and just want some advice, send me a line, and I will do that. And I'm going to work very hard. I'm not going to make a promise, but I did record this. So if you'd like to reminisce, it'll end up, I guess we could dual YouTube it, I guess.
Yeah, I love that.
So we'll put it on my YouTube, I guess. I don't know, does YouTube let you do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
YouTube is new to me. I'm not in an algorithm.
Or else Susan YouTube.
It doesn't work. So the Fundamental Sounds 1867 is my YouTube channel because that's the name they gave me. Twitter, if you tweet, and I don't, but I'll look. And then my website and my email address. So I really appreciate you all coming. It's 8 o'clock. If you have any questions, please come up and ask these gentlemen. They will tell you everything, and thank you very much.
Give it up for John.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
He's a wizard of audio.